That literally took 1 second. Okay, so let's get started. So once again, I'm very excited because we are about to be joined by Samara, the author of Permission to Speak: How to Change What Power Sounds Like, Starting with You. Samara is a speech coach who has helped CEOs, entrepreneurs, candidates for Congress, celebrities, moms returning to work, high school girls who want to make a difference, folks who need to speak with confidence and joy in a voice they recognize as their own to truly make shit happen. And she's all about the new sound of power. Permission to Speak is a game-changing guide to reimagining what power and authority can sound like. And I am so excited to dig into all of the goodness on its pages with her. Welcome, Samara. I also really hope I'm pronouncing that right.
It's perfect. Thank you for that. Hi, everybody. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much.
I'm realizing just how much more I should have done your background, because you guys, I'm in a terrible, I mean, it's fine, but I'm in a hotel room in New York. I live in LA. And I feel like you're getting like this perfect view of what I'm supposed to do in an emergency. So
I mean, look, you can never have too much information. And also we are all about showing up as you are here. So welcome.
I know, I trust that.
You're like, I'm living the jet set life. You know what?
That's right. You guys, I couldn't be in town for this, you know.
And y'all, I am going to drop a link before we start. And then, of course, when we're done, because you are going to want to buy this book, I'm going to drop a link to Samara's site where you can buy the book and learn more about her. And so, Samara, I always start these chats with a little bit of an inception story, and yours is so fascinating. Your journey to the work that you do, to writing this book, is deeply personal, from essentially losing your own voice to coaching folks and finding theirs. And so I would love if you would just get us started by telling us a little bit about what brings you here, how you get here.
I love that. And I'm going to answer that question. But first, I'm going to also say, first of all, hi, everybody. I don't know if I know any of you personally, but I was a Jane member for a while when it was a physical space. And not only that, but this book, which came out on Tuesday and is #1 all over Amazon.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's #1 in women in business, and it's #1 in public speaking. For now, at least. We'll see how that holds, but it's been days of excitement.
We'll all make sure
Thank you, Emma. I know, right? It's for all of you to keep up with that. So get on it. But the origin story of the book and the origin story of my ideas are obviously different. But the origin story of the book, I just want to get to first, because the Jane Club was absolutely pivotal in it. I was at the original space. I had rented a room to do a private coaching session because I have a background as a dialect coach. And there was this actress who was paying me half what everybody else was paying, but my heartstrings were being pulled, and she had a call back, and I made it work. And she could only do it at like 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And I was like, Jessie Klein has the room reserved starting at 9. We can do this. We have to get in and out 8 to 9. I coached her in the private space on Larchmont. And then as I was packing up to go, and I hugged my actress and she left, Jessie came in with her agent, her literary agent, who had flown in from New York. And Jessie said, "Oh my God, wait, David, you should meet Samara. I didn't even have a book idea. You guys, I didn't even have a book idea. I had just pitched a podcast on the same subject." This was 2019. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And he said, "I think there might be a book in you," after he heard me talk for a while. And I had the wherewithal to not say, "What? No, me, right?" I was like, cool. And he came back to New York. We had a Zoom, my first ever Zoom. Can you imagine? I mean, back in 2019, those nascent days. And from there, they helped me write the proposal, or rather they sort of gave me little breadcrumbs, and I wrote the proposal over a year. And then we sold it in this massive bidding war, March of 2020, that completely changed my life. But it was that moment, and it was a Jane. I'm not even that close with Jessie. We don't know each other that well. Our kids played soccer together this one time. But she did that thing in that moment that completely changed my life. So it was right place, right time, but it was also Jane Club and everything it stands for. And I really take that seriously. And so to back it up further to my own origin story, I mean, as you suggest, I was in the middle of an acting graduate program in my mid-20s, like 15, 20 years ago. And I lost my voice and I wasn't sick and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I'm obviously chatty. And it suddenly was like this thing that I relied on my whole life was gone. And I was already having a hard time. Grad school was weird. I was around actors. I love actors, but it wasn't the right vibe. And it was in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was cold, and it was the dead of winter, and I couldn't talk without pain. And I finally got myself to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I don't know if any of the rest of you have had this experience, but I had this little tiny, like, micro camera put up my nose and down the back of my throat. And they got a photo of my vocal cords. And vocal cords are supposed to just be this pretty V. Actually, it's not pretty at all. If you look them up, if you're like into horror movies, feel free to look them up. But like they're beautiful as in they're functional. But if you speak the wrong way at any way, you get little blisters. And I had these blisters at the same spot. And that was a telltale sign of vocal nodules. I don't know if anyone else, feel free to, talk in the comments. Yes, Jessie Klein's book is amazing. I believe she was there to talk about whether or not she should write a second book. And as we all know, she did. So that was just a really, really good day all around. The actress, by the way, from that morning booked the role and was the lead in the Underground Railroad TV show. So like, really big day. Anyway, so I found out that I had vocal nodules. And in my case, I had been talking, it turned out, habitually, just a habit I'd picked up, a tiny bit lower than my body's optimum pitch. So whatever my vocal cords wanted to vibrate at, I was pushing them into something uncomfortable. Why? At the time, I didn't know. And I thought, maybe because I know I come across as kind of young and smiley, maybe even in high school, I started picking up a habit of talking a little bit lower that gave off like a don't mess with me vibe, take me seriously. For some of us, we do the opposite, right? We realize that we come across too forceful and we get the vibe from people around us that we should come across as less intimidating. So maybe we habitually raise our pitch a little bit. But these are the sort of micro adjustments that linguists, sociolinguists will tell us we do all the time and for good reason, because it affects how we get treated. And then sometimes we do it to such an extent or enough that we get hurt. And in my case, I went back to class that day after I got that diagnosis. And the guy who ran the whole program stopped class. I had missed the morning session. And in front of all my classmates, he said, "So what's the diagnosis?" And I said, painfully and really like inaudibly, vocal nodules, I have to go on vocal rest. And he said, just as I thought, bad usage. Right? It's like, first of all, that it's not even that like that phrase has any real significance like in our culture, but I got it, you got it. What he was saying was, you're not just the victim, you're the perpetrator. You did this to yourself. You fucked yourself up. For shame. And the shame of that, I think a lot of people can resonate with. And now that I've started coaching not just actors, but entrepreneurs and my friends who are writers who are pitching and a lot of people in the corporate space, it's pretty clear that any comment we've ever gotten about our voice, even if it's well-meaning, you just say like so much. And I think it's going to really get in the way of you getting taken seriously. Those sorts of comments have two parts to them. One is, well, if I want to try to solve this, how would I even do that? Like, how do I police my voice? Some people, take on that challenge and kind of know how, but for many of us, it's like, well, now I just have that rattling around in there, but it's not like I know how to solve it. And the other part that I'm really interested in is the shame part, right? Is whatever ball of shame exists around that comment that is self-sabotage. Why did I do this to myself? And the reason I pitched this book and it got this huge attention is because I realized, as somebody who did not come up through the public speaking training world, I mean, there's like an industry that teaches people how to do this. And there's an industry in sort of the corporate world that is often called executive presence coaching. I came up through being an artist and honestly an activist and being someone who's connected to social justice my whole life. And I'm like, can we call bullshit? Because the ways that we are all taught from society at large, as well as in literal public speaking classes, in order to sound powerful. If you Google, how do I sound authoritative? How do I sound like a leader? The same advice will come up. Suspiciously consistent, as I like to say, right? Keep your voice low. Speak at 75% your regular pace. Don't get emotional. Don't sound sing-songy. Don't use what are called feminine markers in linguistics, vocal fry and upspeak and hedging, saying like and just and all these things to sort of sound indirect instead of direct. Some of those are habits we have picked up, right? The hedging and all that. Some of those are habits we've picked up to play small, and maybe we're ready to move on from that. And that's always an interesting place to go. But some of what I just described, obviously, is just describing a man. And who was the public literally built for, right? From 2,000 years ago, when men were the only ones, and not only men, rich white men were the only ones who were allowed on stages, to now, the standard of what power should sound like exists all around us and is not named. And I'm here to name it. You know, I mean, we're all here to name it. But I love just raising the flag and saying, these are voice biases masquerading as good advice. And there is a whole other way to approach public speaking, which is to look at the people that we love listening to from our own communities, from big, award-winning moments, Lizzo on that stage on Sunday, our political heroes, our activist heroes, our artist heroes. What actually makes us, are the people in our ears, even like for podcasts, right? It doesn't have to be big stages, right? It could just be somebody who's speaking in public who is willing to sort of scale themselves up in a way that feels nonetheless human. And what are they doing? Well, none of the things that Google says a leader's supposed to do, right? AOC breaks all the rules. And yet her speeches, right? All the ones I've just talked about are the ones that make us physically feel the urge to share them. That's what goes viral. So it's obviously, my goal is not to say, so sound like AOC, right? But my goal is to say that people like her, people like all of the people I just mentioned, people that are coming to mind for you, I hope, should offer all of us a sense of permission to be a little weirder, to bring a little bit more of our emotional honesty into spaces, right? The word vulnerable gets used a lot. To me, it just means talking about what we care about, like we care about it. And that's something most of us have been trained out of for completely understandable reasons having to do with safety. And the question is, when we are speaking on our own convictions in our biggest moments, when we're pitching, when we're trying to get money or a yes or a vote, how do we dare ourselves to bring a little bit more of the version of ourselves that we love into those spaces and teach those spaces that we are what power sounds like?
I love it. And, I think there's folks in the chat freaking out about, just like the sexism that we're broaching here. And something I think is really fascinating is that your book kicks off with this exploration of sort of how do we, I know all of us know why the standard for what power and authority sound and look like are, white men. If you have any sense of history, that is evident to you, but there's such fascinating history around why so many of us might be sitting here thinking, public speaking freaks me out. I'm so scared of public speaking.
Right.
That's just not something that I'm good at. That's not the kind of person I am. And I would love if you would sort of, help us explore how we got to this moment and that power that we have now to really change the sexist ideas and the racist ideas that have led us here.
Yeah, I explore this in the introduction because I think it sort of just needs to be named. There are elements of public speaking that even John F. Kennedy surely had to face. Public speaking is weird. You're being seen at scale. It's an odd thing for a body to handle, right? There's all kinds of studies that say that for cave people, obviously our actual ancestors and our bodies are the same bodies. When there's eyes on you, it feels like a threat. This is part of how our nervous system works. So there's this part of it, right? Public speaking is scary because you're being seen. And then there's this other part of it, which affects some of us more than others, more than say JFK, which is, and we feel the history, the mythology of public spaces playing on us. And that story is one we get to reckon with and decide how much we want to be part of changing it, both in terms of how we listen to other people, right? We all have biases. We get to have a second wiser thought when we hear, oh, that accent is so strong. I need to find someone else to talk to. Wait, is it actually? I'm working on voice bias. Let me see. Is it actually? Oh no, they are completely a good communicator. I just need to work a little tiny bit harder than if they were a native speaker. Okay, I can handle that, right? Those sort of tiny little internal thoughts, but also the ways that we discount ourselves, that we can put vocal biases on ourselves. I say too much. I don't deserve to be talking here. Right? I mean, we might not have that exact thought, but some version of that is rattling around in all of our minds. And it's because of this history of public spaces. Even if a guy would say just as much as us, we think of it as something that, discounts us.
Totally.
Did I answer your question? It's just so, obviously it's also like part of what's just to name it, part of what's been so interesting with this process is like when I coach, I'm meeting with obviously every individual where they are with what's really going on with them, and we can work on what's really specific. And then in writing the book and in talking in these large themes, of course, we have to get kind of general and talk universals. But if anybody wants to bring up anything specific in the chat, right, or anything that feels like it doesn't fit you or it specifically fits you, it helps to kind of get granular every once in a while. So I just want to honor that, like, part of this work and part of decolonizing public speaking is that it affects us all differently.
Well, and I think, that's something I'm curious about too, is there is all this, we don't even have to call it bad, just advice that is out there that's basically, like you say, like emulate and contort yourself to fit into this idea of what power is that we've all been socialized, and it's deeply ingrained in us to accept that that is just the baseline, that's what good public speaking is. What advice would you offer instead for those of us who want to sort of reclaim our voices and step into the arena of public speaking, put ourselves out there more, speak up more? What is sort of that advice that you offer to folks who are coming to you and really beginning that journey?
There's this amazing book that just came out that is like full of really good advice. But I mean, I'm kidding, but I'm also serious because that is the goal of the book, is to arm you with answers to that question. Separately, I have a free like 5-6 minute warm up. If anybody wants to pick it up, it's at samarabay.com/goodies. And it really answers that question of what do I do in the 5 minutes or the hour before I'm supposed to give a presentation to set myself up for the most amount of permission. And in this case, permission, I really mean freedom. I really mean the ability to invite ourselves, the version of ourselves that we like, that shows up around our favorite people, into spaces, right? And there's like an important distinction here, because obviously the version we are around our favorite people when we're maybe having a drink or for whatever reason we feel uninhibited is not always a 1-to-1 ratio to work. I mean, this group doesn't have a huge amount of like corporate toxic stuff that you're dealing with. I imagine this is a bunch of entrepreneurs or freelancers, but maybe this does ring true. Certainly people who work in office contexts. It's not like my advice is saying, be that version of you, not at work. At work, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Good luck. I think that's really unrealistic. And there's so many power dynamics at play that you have going on that I don't know about, right? Like, that's not really what I'm saying. But what I'm interested in, and the reason I got into this work and the reason that working with those first-time candidates for office in 2018 got me started on all of this, is because for me, it's about reclaiming public speaking in those moments that really matter. It's not about the mundane day-to-day. We can work on this stuff then or not, right? But that's often about comfort and safety and getting what we want and negotiating away parts of ourselves in order to do it. And it's, that negotiation, hopefully we get to do less and less the more power we have. But I'm really interested in these moments when we really have the opportunity to sort of take our fate in our hands, and we either do or we don't. And we don't because of a history of hiding.
Totally. And I think, something that I found really fascinating is later, sort of towards the end of the book, you start exploring almost the power of a different way of looking at public speaking, maybe a more feminine, feminist idea of what public speaking really is. This idea that it's not just, I'm talking at you, look at me, that it's this exchange that when we speak up, other people will benefit, and that it's not, people pleasing so much as that we are offering something when we offer up our voices. And I would love to dig into that a little bit with you about, this new way of looking at it and what that could mean to folks if we reframe what it means when we're speaking publicly, how that can sort of help us to understand what our goals really are, what we really want to do to get ready, what we want to say.
Yeah, thank you. And look, you read my book.
Oh, I wish I could show you. I read it online, so I can't show you usually I'm like, look at all my little Post-it flags, but there were many.
So sweet, you guys.
Post-it
Carmen
flags.
just referenced chapter 8, which like a lot of people who interview me haven't read yet. So there's a lot. But one of the things that I want to say about chapter 8, about what you're talking about, is yes, when we get nervous, what's happening is all the things I've already discussed, right? It's very real. The nervous system, the literal way that our body feels when it gets seen, plus the history of public spaces. And then there's this other part of it, which is, what are we focusing on? If we're focusing on ourselves, again, completely understandable, no shame. But if we're thinking, don't do this, I'm going to do this, I have to make sure that I do that, don't forget to do this, we're not thinking about the most important thing, which is who we're speaking for. Whether it's for the people in the audience or for some group that isn't there that we're advocating on behalf of. And there could be exceptions to this, but I'm betting truly that if there's anything that we're getting up to talk about, it is going to benefit somebody. I mean, right? I know the Janes. And this is what we're here to do. And so, I mean, like, it's what I'm doing right now, right? Like, of course, this is about me. I wrote a book, but like, I didn't write it for me. I wrote it because when I was coaching those women who were running for office, it was the summer of 2018. We were all messes. I mean, we were seeing what was happening at the border. We were getting those photos every day. And I was in this lucky position of coaching Gal Gadot on Wonder Woman 2. I was in DC. I got to tag along with my really political friend and go to all these marches. But I was like, the activists are getting exhausted, and the 2018 midterms are coming, and it's our first chance to change the narrative since Trump got elected, and everybody is burned the fuck out. And this is terrifying. And then I had this chance to coach these women who are running for office. And I was like, oh, I see. The problem is the wrong people are in charge. And the people who should be our leaders, who have the life experience, both in terms of their actual skills, but also in terms of the empathy, to be who should be making decisions for us all at the grandest scale, have trouble showing up as magnificently as they are in the moments that matter. And that's obviously around which all the books like suddenly, and why, obviously on some level, that lovely lit agent of mine saw that there was something to talk about here. But my point is, I had such a clear why and who this book is for, right? I sometimes get tired talking about it just because, like, I've heard myself say some of this stuff a lot, but I nonetheless gather myself, and per chapter 8, make sure I am always talking about who I'm actually talking about this for, or connect to it at least ahead of time.
Definitely.
And the other part of it also, I feel like this connects to something in the intro that I thought maybe I could read. Is that cool?
Yes.
I say, as you might have noticed, I define public speaking pretty broadly. In fact, I think it might be just speaking in front of people who do not know everything about us already. No matter the forum, it does require courage, but not just courage to get up there despite your audience's potential judgments across the chasm. No, the real courage is to reject the old conceit of a chasm between speaker and audience at all. If you're the only one talking, it's a dialogue. What that matters to me matters to you. What do we share? What do we want? in common. That's like fundamental human coexistence stuff. It's the promise of belonging and the pleasure of community. It's saying, let's care about things together. Public speaking is just caring about things together, bigger. And the thing is, sometimes it takes a lot of imagination to believe that, because if you're going into a room full of men who are venture capitalists, say, and hold the purse strings to your potential future, and you have this app that is close to your heart and you hope they get, but you know it's for women and they're not women, right? I mean, like this made up scenario has all the problems in it that a lot of scenarios would have. And the idea is that we nonetheless go in with a love-based instead of a fear-based perspective, rather than, I hope they don't laugh at me. How can I make what I care about spread? How can I talk about what we want in common? And how can I imagine, I give this metaphor in the final chapter, you know, often women, stereotype, but if it fits you, you know, often women have trouble sharing their stories because they worry either, I'll seem self-indulgent, I'll be talking too much about myself, or my story isn't important enough. And if someone is choking in front of you, and there's a room full of people and they're panicked, and you know CPR, would you go, I don't want to make it about me? Right? This is what public speaking is. And the people don't look like they're choking. And we get to step into the imagination world. You know, the Toni Morrison quote about, as you enter positions of trust and power, dream a little before you think. The dream is, the imagination work is, they are choking and they need me. Thank God I am here.
I love that. And I think, you know, when you talk about imagination and really just reframing, it makes it clear that something that was very evident in the book is that there's so much inner work that needs to happen, as well as, you know, it's yes, there's outer work. There is, let me think about my pitch and my tone and examine, you know, do I like
all of those are results of inner work. You know,
right.
I mean, that's what's so wild is I come from this like technical world. Like I could talk about vowels and consonant sounds and the pitch of the musicality of English out loud, right? I'm happy to. I love that stuff. But none of it actually matters without the inner work. The permission, it's why the word permission is the word that's listed 5 times and not the word speak. That was me. That was me being like, hey, publishers. They gave me like 5 terrible book covers. One of them had like sound waves, but in order to make it look more interesting, they did one in one color and then one in a different color. And I was like, you just did 5 on top of each other. That's 5 different people talking at the same time. I was so deeply offended. But I pushed back, obviously. I had permission to speak. And one of the things I said was, let's just do words, and the word permission is the word that matters the most, because it's the inner work. I totally interrupted you. Do you remember where you were going to go with that?
It's okay.
I'm excited.
I love that. I just was also fascinated with the fact that the inner work is also about like you call it decolonizing public speaking, almost decolonizing the stuff that we think about, right? Like we have to learn how to take up more space. Like so much of it touched on things of like fat phobia and tearing that down, and just all these interconnected systems that, you know, keep women small, keep us quiet, keep us polite and policed and all of that. And so I also would just love if we could explore that terrain too, of like, what are these other things that we're going to have to confront on that voice journey, right? To like reclaim our voice.
You know, that's so cool. I feel like what I learned from writing this book is that voice, both like the literal sounds and also this idea of like our values out loud, right? Voice with a capital V, maybe. It intersects with literally all the parts of our life. Partly because on a literal level, communication, right, is how we get heard and get what we want in the world. But also, yeah, it connects to our sense of our body. It connects to our sense of value, of worth, right? My whole first chapter, you guys, is about breath. It's about the moment before we speak. But I come from a theater background, and the last thing I wanted, I mean, I love actors. I am a theater person, but the last thing I wanted was this to feel like a theater book where you had to just do like ha ha, right? The ha is fine, yay, But I'm like, why do we habitually hold ourselves in and not let our diaphragm fully go down into the messy part where emotions and gut instincts and sometimes trauma lives? And the answer is different for all of us, but like, there's obviously all kinds of safety mechanisms at place to keep us from breathing. Because when we take a deep breath, all of the messy stuff from inside of us has the potential to come out. And when that messy stuff comes out is probably when we will make the greatest impact. When we can show up as vulnerably as somebody who's willing to say, I'm going to surprise myself. I'm going to see what comes out, and the emotional content is going to be with me as well. The audience will trust us. They have the possibility of falling in love with us. They have the possibility of doing what we want, right? And obviously, safety is an actual concern, and not every space can handle that. But which ones can? And how do we find out without a little bit of trying and supporting each other? I mean, the other part of this, obviously, that must be said is that my goal here was to offer some space, some language, because voices are invisible and it's really hard to like see this stuff, right? And a huge sense of solidarity, because obviously what I'm talking about affects all of us. Mm. And most of us think, as I did when I had my vocal nodules, why me? I would sip tea. I think, what is my voice trying to tell me? Why can't I just be normal? I looked around, no one else seems to have this problem. And the reality is, this is really close to a lot of us. And your friends are feeling it too. And your other Janes and your, kid maybe. And we get to name it and love on each other and send texts, little hype texts and say, you have permission today. Which is like kind of a joke, because obviously like we don't really want anyone else to give us permission. We want to give it to ourselves, but also why not
I'll take it.
Generously give it to each other.
Anyone who has my number, feel free, like slide into my DMs. I think you have permission. Is it appropriate? Like greeting in the morning from each other.
Right. I don't
Harley
remember, Carmen, but you have permission today. Okay, thank you.
You don't need my permission, but you do have permission.
Right? It's like, I don't have standing to give you permission. You should give, but also I'm happy to.
I love it. And Samara, thank you. Y'all, there are so many exercises, frameworks, pieces of advice in the book. I will shamelessly plug that one of them is thinking back on your previous accomplishments and like highest moments before speaking gigs. So just saying, if you're not coming to Jane Brag and creating your brag book with us every week and keeping track of your accomplishments, you can start now. And perhaps your first brag should be that you went to samarabay.com and purchased permission to speak. The book is so good. Yes, I read all of it because I couldn't put it down. It was just so good, Samara. And thank you.
Thank you
so much for writing it, for sharing it with the world, for being here with us. It has been so wonderful. And yeah, y'all keep in touch with Samara.
And oh my gosh, yes, our pink power. Somebody's calling out our pink
everyone
power.
Put on your power.
I just got into Farm Rio, and now I'm like obsessed. I just want to name that I put into the chat, samarabay.com/goodies. You can also obviously just go there
for that
when you
free
go to
exercise and all.
But but it's hidden. You have to know to find it. But it's a free little warm up, right? And part of what it has in it is what Carmen was just referencing, how we can prime ourselves for permission in those moments that matter.
I love it. Thank you, Samara. I can't wait to share this talk on Jane on Demand. I'm so glad everyone could be here live. And thank you again for being with us.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, you guys.